All right. All right. Today's guest is Kilian Duarte. He is the bass player of Scale the Summit and Angel Vivaldi and a bunch of other awesome bands. This dude is a phenom on the bass guitar. If you go to his Instagram page, you will probably want to hang up your bass. But I myself feel invigorated when I see a dude shred the way he does. So, welcome, Kilian.
Dude, thank you so much for having me on here. Honestly, I missed seeing you, and like honestly, big honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, man. Yeah, we're really excited to bring this podcast to life. And just, and I'm going to reiterate this over and over all throughout the podcast, but the whole purpose of this for me, for my aspect, is to give people the shortcuts that took so many of us so many years to figure out just by, trial and tribulation. And so I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. Number one, what is the right hand technique that you relied on the most, and as well as the left hand technique for when it came to playing bass in specific?
Um, so when I was a little younger, I had a little bit of a playing injury scare, and I went back to the drawing board and I saw a player named Gary Willis, and he gave me this technique. I cannot recommend Gary Willis enough, but of raising your elbow for technical music. The reason why for this is for the right hand specific answer is that when you have your elbow raised up, when you're doing technical things, your wrist is straight versus where you see a lot of fusion guys, they do what I call raptor claw. And that can lead to a lot of strain issues here because you're technically like giving an obstacle between where the energy is being transferred. So that was a big one. And then on top of that was my three finger technique, which was from Billy Sheehan, which I was very fortunate enough to like do some work with him. And it's basically 3-2-1-3, 2-1-3-2, 1-3-2-1 technique to break up the gallop.
Now, and you do that, it's 12 notes, right?
Hmm?
Broken into a movement of three fingers separated four notes at a time.
Exactly.
Right.
So that between those two things are the biggest things for my right hand that have helped me. I will say this, as much as the breaking the four note pattern, I really try and give all my students injury prevention. Try and raise your elbow. If you ever feel strain, try and correct things your body feels. Your body is always telling you if it's straining yourself. And I play a lot of technical, crazy music. So like stuff like that. If you're playing a lot of crazy stuff, don't ever do like this. Try and raise your elbow. So that's for that. For my left hand, it's much more simple.
Real quick, before we
Yep.
get there, how do you position your right hand? Now, I have a very, um, I don't know, I just look into this a lot. I'm very intrigued about this. But now, you play so many things, and you move so fluently with your fingers.
Thank you.
Do you ever do four fingers?
I do for four note patterns on my low string. So let's say if like I'm playing an abiotic song, go dun, 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 but it's one end, one end, one end. Then I'll do like a flurry, like a flamenquilla.
Yeah. Now, when you do that, how are you positioning yourself? Because all four fingers, right, for new players, right, all four fingers are different heights. So when I do three finger patterns, I have to shorten up my middle finger a lot. You know what I
No,
mean?
no, no. Understand.
And then to match my pinky, I would have to shorten them up even more.
Yeah, so I only use four fingers for bursts. So that's very specific. So let's pretend my finger is a string. So if I'm going, so I will raise and angle my hand in the
Right.
same
Yeah. You're
pattern.
you're angling your
Okay.
hand to bring it. Right.
But when I do three, I try and do what Billy Sheehan does is that I try
It's good.
and level everything. So
Awesome.
four is that I'm doing a burst and coming down like it's an angled burst. But with three, when I'm doing like 30-second notes, it's like that. But that is a very good question because a lot of people like I do use my pinky,
I had to
but it,
figure that out on my own. You know what I mean? And that's the whole purpose of this is like that. You know how long it took me to just sit there and like flub a note and be like, why is that? Why every time when I hit with this finger, is it falling behind or is this one too far ahead? It's because they're different lengths.
Yeah, yeah.
You
A
have to
big part.
make you have to make up for that on your own.
Yeah, a big part of my private instruction is showing people how to like, regardless of their anatomy, is to kind of compensate for regardless of their hand shape. Like, look, dude, I'm 5.5 feet tall. I don't have big hands, but it doesn't matter. I play bass. I play upright bass, whatever. Um, I think anyone's anatomy can be adjusted slightly to be able to do these things. And I always bring that message of optimism to people who are like, especially with like slap stuff and stuff like that. Like, oh, my thumb is shaped weird. I go like, dude, I have like a little itty thumb. Like, I think it's just there are a lot of things that people. It's details. It's little details, and I think that that's important because I think as much as the internet's awesome, we also have done this culture of where like, oh well, there's a video, go figure it out. But first time I studied with Matthew Garrison. He taught me a lot of things in person, where it's like little nuances with that. But I'm not trying to deviate too long. The second thing is, and it's tied to that, with my left hand, and it's really one finger per fret for everything, doing scale exercises, and trying to eliminate finger flare.
And finger what?
So, like when you're doing certain scales, just when we're starting to develop left hand technique, like just by the nature of how our tendons work, like we have like a finger that will flare out, like we have pinky flare.
Oh, finger flare, yeah. A finger
Yeah,
flare.
yeah, exactly. So I try to reduce it as much as I can. I'm not saying that I'm perfect at it, and I don't think anyone is. I've seen Anthony Jackson and Victor wouldn't have finger flare, but the difference is the purpose is that you always have one finger per fret, and that if you do a complicated motion, you don't have a finger that flares out. Like you ever have an introductory.
Right. I call that
Yeah,
staying at attention.
that's a good way of putting it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed that like especially in the beginning, like if I would hit with one finger, right, all the others would go out. That's a very common thing, right?
Mhm.
Or people like will completely throw the pinky out, like really far. And
Yeah.
as I got better at things, I was like, well, why is this guy faster? Why can he hit that riff faster? And then it's like, well, my hand looks like I'm playing whack-a-mole, and his hand
It's calm.
looks like that. It
Like
just
if you see like a perfect example, it's not a bass player, but like Guthrie Govan, his left hand is just like smooth as silk. It looks like he's barely moving, and what it is basically, that's just a lot of scale exercises, a lot of exercises as well. Um, so again,
another thing
yeah,
I'm wondering about you, because you mentioned that you have small hands, right? Um, but I do this thing called splitting the difference, where I make sure that my thumb, right? Like part of this is with your scale patterns that you do. Do you do 2 note or 3 note patterns? Like
both. I teach my students to do both. So like I do when I do make them do the circle of fifths, I do straight ahead, and then I make them do like broken patterns. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, and so 2 and 3. So yeah, both.
so when I do like a 3 5 7 pattern, third fret, fifth fret, seventh fret, right? I always center myself, especially because I play these 35 inch scale basses, right?
Hmm.
Um, I it's those the jump is so big, so I always center around my middle finger area
Hmm.
because I tell people a lot of people they'll start off their starting point here with their index finger, right? So they'll have to reach for the fifth fret and then reach again for the seventh fret. Where if I center myself on the fifth fret, I just have to go back a little bit for the third and up a little bit for the seventh. So like I split the difference of the distance, and I really focus that with my thumb. I was just wondering if you had similar.
I definitely believe in relaxed left hand thumb. I mean, one of the things I found is the more you tighten up on the grip on the neck, the more the obstacles that your fingers are going to have to face are going to be harder. I always say, but I'll say this as a caveat. I'm a very strange person in the sense that people go like, "Oh, I can't play a jazz bass neck, or I can't play a P bass neck." And I play guitar as well. They'd be like, well, hey, Ibanez necks or Strat necks, I don't actually feel neck profiles. I'm a very
I
weirdo.
only do on the extremes, man. I mean, granted, most of what I play is similar. Like, it really doesn't matter if I'm playing a 6-string guitar, an 8-string guitar, or my 5-string bass, or even when I had the sixes. Most of what I play all has a really thin profile. But
Yeah.
even when I get to the oddballs, like the Strats or, a Gibson chunky neck, unless it's really extreme, I'd noticed I don't even notice it anymore. And I don't use my thumb a lot. I could play almost everything I play. I could play without my thumb even there at this point,
Well, I
right?
think it's because you do have good left thumb technique in the sense that like where you are a multi-instrumentalist and you're not having this obstacle. I think it's more to the fact that you have a relaxed thumb and that you're distributing the duties to your fingers more than you're gripping tightly. What I
And
find that people grip
I
tightly.
also use both too, right? So like by splitting the difference,
Mhm,
each time I try to attack a note similar to you, one finger per fret, right?
mhm,
I'm using not just the index finger, but part of the thumb. And then when I switch, I sometimes I'll rotate on my thumb, especially on a bass, right? With
mhm,
the bigger scale. Sometimes you just got to rotate on the thumb. And
mhm.
again, I find that you don't have to work so hard with your pinky, right? If your thumb's sharing the work.
I agree totally. Again, I'm very traditionalist in that sense. Like, just scale, circle of fifths. Um, you can't undo that discipline. I think that, whether you want to make music theory a bigger part of your life, I can, my life theory is just the more information you have, the better. So
The
for
better
me,
the advantage, right?
yeah, it's just in general, like, I don't feel that like ignorance has ever given anyone an advantage. So I am not a music theory elitist in any capacity because so many good songwriters have written amazing songs not knowing what a G major scale is. But if someone were to ask me, like, hey, how can I improve my form on my left hand? How can I play technical music? I'd make you run scales. And whether you want to integrate that into how you approach composition, that's up to you, how you analyze harmony. But I think that,
This is a great segue because
yeah,
I was going to ask you next, what is your favorite harmony to accent? What is your favorite interval to bring up as far as making the bass stand out or sit back in? So when I had sent you this question previously, I
yeah.
didn't specify, right? So this is really a great expansion. What do you like to accent to make the bass stand out? And what do you like to accent to make the bass sit nicely?
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful question. So I always say this, and the people who give definitive, like, very kind of demonstrative, like definitive answers to this, I think they kind of are missing kind of the point. And what I say is that context matters. So every
Right.
recording with every musician, with every player, with every context is a different challenge for me. And I view every musician I work with, every scenario as a unique scenario. So I've played a ton of wedding bands, I've played on tours, I've played in theater gigs, I've done GB, I've done recording sessions. The only standard I can give to any player is that the more you know and the more you're willing to be open minded is the best advice. Um,
Open-minded is a key phrase here. I would like to reiterate that over and over, um, because in the beginning, that was that's like huge secret to making big strides is like in the beginning I wouldn't play certain kinds of music
mhm.
because I wanted to play other kinds of music so much, not realizing that there's fundamentals from other genres and other building blocks of music that the artists that we listen to did take from and
Yeah.
did bring that to the forefront. And when you learn, um, the I can't say because people will hate me, but there's a band that I do am not fond of,
Mhm,
but I grew up listening to a band that used to cover that band's songs all the time, and I loved them,
mhm,
and I wanted to play these songs, and they were faster, and I sucked at them, so I had to go back and learn the songs from the band that I didn't love
Yeah.
because they were at a slower pace, and then I was able to shine with them.
Again, like every little thing tempo, um, kind of attack, everything is a learning experience. So like playing in a wedding band and also playing in a punk band are equally beneficial. And like people would be like, well, one, you can just phone in. I go like, no, dude, like the stage
You
presence
can't
playing.
phone in down picking. People could say whatever they want. I've played in punk bands. You can't phone that in, dude.
Exactly.
You
You
can't.
can't. There are a lot of people who fake it and it sounds like
Yeah,
shit. And
if you just strum away some power chords, sure, yeah, you could fake it. But
yeah,
if you're doing your job, you can't phone it in, no matter the genre. I
the
think.
same way that when you do or fake, like, I don't know, like a lot of pop music or whatever, there's an art to both of those things. And the thing is that, like, for me, when you're talking about intervals, so to make it shine, context is everything. So if I'm in a project where I'm personally involved and I'm allowed to have free reign, I try always to accentuate the song. But at the same time, I'm also view the bass guitar as a color, meaning that, like, so I remember watching a lot of my favorite guitar players because I'm very influenced by guitar players, and again, Angel, Chris, fucking, you know me, my resume, like I'm just playing with guitar players all the time.
Yeah, me
But
too.
for guitar players, they'll do a record to be like, well, let's do a solo with a Les Paul, let's do rhythms with the Telly, let's try this technique with that. I very much was in that school of production where a lot of bass players go like, well, we got to do monochromatic black for the thing, or a monochromatic approach to something, where a lot of the records I found that I would play certain parts with the pick, I play certain parts with my fingers, I would tap certain lines, I'd slap certain lines. It works really well for certain genres. um, I guess the only thing I could say is that, like, with technique and stuff like that. But going back around, I don't mean to caveat too much. Ninths, minor thirds,
For
or
those
more.
who don't know what a ninth is, can you please explain to people what a ninth is?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So if I was playing a scale within a chord, so like let's say I'm playing an A major chord, the ninth is an octave above and then one note above. So it's the second note of the scale, an octave
So in
above.
the case of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re.
Yeah, it's do above and re. It's a nice thing if any prog fans here, you hear like Martin Mendez, Opeth. Um, he does that a lot. Like he'll just like do a little slide into stuff. This is for like chill parts where you want to just not make it too generic. Um, I do that. I'm a very
I'm
big
a huge fan of the ninth. It's
yeah.
become my favorite interval. To even if I'm not given free reign on something, like because live is live, you know.
Yeah, yeah, of
Um,
course.
that was one of the first. I think it probably happened by mistake too, sliding up too fast or something. But I started accenting that a lot. Playing up through a power chord and then adding the ninth is such a beautiful and simple bass line. So beautiful, so simple, sounds good in pretty much every spot in every song. If it's a four chord progression song too, forget about it. You could do it on every single chord. You
And
could
also, you're not being excessive usually.
No, it just sounds sweet. It's like one extra note.
Yeah, exactly. And it just gives a little tension to the chord, the root note that you're trying to play.
Yeah,
Again, context everything, but I'm also, with speaking about fundamental stuff, like the 4 records I'm releasing this year, there's
yeah.
a lot of kick drum play. And I think that there is so much you can do with just sticking with the kick drum. So if you have a drummer with great feet, if they know exactly where to accentuate, how to play with the feet, um, again, if you have a generic drummer that's kind of like not very talented, like I guess you're gonna have to just do what you got to do. But like when you have very talented drummers that you're working with, there are really awesome things you can just even do with a root and an octave. Like I'm a big fan of like the fifth and the octave, as long as you keep it within kick drum safety. And if you are really good with like ghost notes and like really kind of doing those like micro little tensions and knowing how to place notes and like release tension, release. These are things you learn like recording for years. But yeah, I'm really happy with my rhythm section work on these records. And I would say that even with my pop work and the things I'm doing that are totally not within my big band things, just like understanding the kick drum and the snare relationship is so vital. And then knowing how to use fifth and octave.
Right, and for those who don't know, root fifth octave is just like a power chord shape.
Yeah,
You could look it up very easily. It does sound awesome if you strum it on a bass. Sometimes,
yeah.
it
And chords sound great on bass too if you're in the right
it
context.
yeah, if you're yeah right, if you're in the right context, right. Usually, you could just play them up a little bit higher on the neck. Usually, everything sounds a little bit smoother in a higher octave, less mud. But if you have the right like settings, the right tone, the right attack, you can
Right
put
moment, yeah.
yeah, you could
Anything goes right moment.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um so what arpeggio or what type of arpeggiation would you suggest someone to dive into when it comes to taking the first steps into prog rock, right? So we have root fifth octave, right?
Hmm?
And we've talked about the ninth. When you do prog stuff, do you ever accent the third, the sixth, the
Um,
fourth, or the seventh? What?
I mean that's a very loaded question, but if I want,
Of course it is.
oh no,
Well,
no,
we wouldn't be here if it wasn't.
oh no, of
But
course. But I do have an answer for you. So I would say that if you're first dipping your toes into the pool, I think that a lot of prog is based on metal, and a lot of metal inherently is based more on minor scales. So learn your Dorian and Aeolian modes and just minor third, fifth. Um, you'll just start seeing that pattern more than you will other scales. I'm not saying you won't. I'm just saying like in that world, minor or metal is kind of like that darker sound of minor. So minor, Alien and Dorian, minor third. Um, especially if like you're a kid, you're starting to learn music. Which again, I'm such a anti gatekeeper with learning things. So if you're someone that's learning prog or just someone that just wants to learn songs, do that. I think there's nothing wrong with just learning those basics shapes.
and I want to express this again. Yearn to learn
Hmm.
because I by the time this podcast has reached, the episodes that we have scripted, I'm probably going to say this 10,000 times. But I figured out how to play both guitar and bass and everything musical theory, like trying to figure out an upside down puzzle in the dark all by
Okay.
myself. That's probably like a million or 10 million pieces. Like it just poking and prodding, really having no idea. And with all that structure, I was very worried about crushing creativity by having to study music theory.
Mhm.
And I swear to you, it didn't happen. I swear to you, I can write so much more, so much quicker now. Um, but I learned it by myself, right? So it took me a really long time to even grasp the concept of scales. But I'll tell you, all these years later, and I didn't learn scales for years, but all these years later, I can explain scales to you in a way that will blow your mind because of my deep understanding. And so much of that just came from the relentless Google the pattern, do the pattern, do the
Mhm.
pattern a million times until you know everything about it and what's going on. Why is a Dorian pattern a minor mode? Right? Why is the Dorian mode a minor mode? Why is that? Why is the Lydian mode a major mode?
Mhm.
Why is that? What effect does the tritone have? These crazy questions will like once you learn the answers to them and you learn the answers by putting in the time
It'll click.
and seeing a note and hearing it and getting that feedback and feeling it in your fingertips and feeling the bass resonate with the kick drum, right? All like feeling that stuff and putting the time in, that's where you get your understanding. And there's no other way to do it than to just want to figure it out, you know?
Absolutely, I couldn't
I don't
agree
even
more.
know the question that I've been trying to answer for all these years. I just know that I'm trying to answer the question.
I think that that's one of the beautiful things about music is the fact that it is inherently art. It is going to be up to interpretation. It comes down to the one thing I can recommend to any musician that wants to realize what it takes to achieve excellence, and it's never be an island, be around other musicians, because no matter how inherently talented you are, no matter how much drive you have, being around other people's creative energy is going to get something out of you that you cannot imagine. Like these records I'm doing this year could not have happened without being around these absolutely wonderful people. Like, we both played with Angel, we both played with a bunch of people, and it's their interpretation of these frequencies and everything will make you a better player. So the more musicians you play with will just inherently make you better.
Well,
Um,
and we've all been on our own journey too, and that's the thing. Everybody's been on the same but different journey, right? We've all a lot of us who do understand complex musical ideas and melodic breakdowns and rhythmic structures that would make people's heads explode. We came about all of this by poking around our own particular way
mhm,
and then coming to our conclusion, and then we collaborate with someone who did that same thing, but they came about it this way.
mhm,
And it's great that you brought up the kick drum because something a lot of bass players come to bass from guitar. I did, right? Um, a lot of bass players come that way. Something I would like to explain to new bass players or beginner bass players or even remotely advanced bass players. Drummers count things differently.
yep,
And you have like we count like guitar players when we play bass. We really do. Um, Sometimes we'll count like drummers, but I've met more bass players that count more like a guitar player when it comes to how we're structuring out riffs, how we're structuring out patterns. Drummers always have twice as long as the rest of us. Always. We always look at things in smaller patterns. And I think that's because when we're trying to practice and we're trying to learn, we break it down in smaller sections where drummers, they have this groove, unless they're doing crazy syncopation and stuff I call the code, right?
mhm,
Doing these crazy syncopated patterns. Um, Unless they're doing that, they're really just keeping a groove. It's like groove fill, groove fill, groove fill. That's playing drums sometimes. And it's just when you can figure out how to break down the drummer's time, not yours, you can have a larger idea that you can get across. You brought up playing off the kick drum and you said, if you don't have an experienced drummer, there's that Carol K video that I love.
I love karaoke.
Oh
Yeah,
my
she's the best.
gosh, I have learned so much just from
Senpai,
her outlook.
Senpai K.
But that video that she has of making the metronome dance,
Mhm,
it's so hard to find, first off. I can't just always just find it. But if you have a drummer who's just with his kick drum, you can make that kick drum move if you want to.
absolutely.
Another part of this, it might even be this particular podcast. I got to figure out where it is. But another thing that we've discussed on this podcast is being on the upbeat, being on the downbeat, being ahead of the beat, being behind the beat. That's a big thing. Hitting your bass right before the kick drum,
My
right
pop
after
gig,
the kick drum.
I've been so fortunate with wedding theater, and I'm in a Duran Duran tribute band. So being in pop gigs professionally has been so fantastic with understanding pop grooves. And like, there's a lot of people who play metal or rock. They go like, "Well, pop music's easy." I go like, "Have you ever like real?" I'm not saying that it isn't. Yes, playing Dream Theater or playing Tech Death is harder. Yes, I'm not going to debate that. The difference is that there's an art to each, and there's a beautiful art and a mastery to playing pop music extremely well. And there's a reason why you see like Sugarfoot play with Michael Jackson, and he nails it. And like, you'll see some um, Al. I forget what the bass
To
player was.
play anything right
Yeah,
is hard. To
yeah,
play
exactly.
anything like a specialist is not easy.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
like, I learned in the beginning, right, just to play power chords instead of open chords, and that meant that when I played song, yeah, I was playing the song, but was I playing it exact? Was I giving that song all the spice? No, man.
Yeah.
And the same goes for those grooves. Anyone can just 4/4 through a pop song.
But saucing it really
But
good.
yeah, but saucing it and making that kick drum and your bass make everyone's hips in that entire stadium shake.
That
That's the
that
difference.
making an audience dance is a unique accomplishment. It's like when you're in a metal band, if you can make people mosh or thrash or like freak out. But you're 100% right. If you can make an audience dance, it's a unique
If
accomplishment
you
as
get
well.
their hips going, and that's all bass and kick drum, it's
Mhm.
that's that relationship is what makes that happen. And that's not just always playing on the one. That's dancing with that kick drum.
It's that pocket and grease. Yeah, and the more you do it, the more you get it. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Yeah. So, hey, that's all the questions I have, my dude. This was very informative. I hope everyone is taking this information from this phenom of the bass guitar, Kilian Duarte.
Thank you
What
so
is
much.
your Instagram?
So my Instagram is my name, Kilian Duarte Bass. So let me spell that because my name is not generic. KILIANDUARTE BASS. That's my Instagram, and you can see me play a lot of stuff on there. But yeah,
Well, yeah, thank you so very much. And
thanks
please,
so much.
everybody, go follow him so that way you can decide whether your bass wants to be firewood or a creative tool. No, I'm just kidding. Always
Thank
make it a creative tool, and then that way you could be a creative tool.
Yeah,
No,
man.
but
Thank you so
thank
much
you
for
so
having
very
me.
much for your time. Very eye opening, and it's been such a pleasure to have a conversation with you. And I hope we get to have you on again.
Dude, I can't wait to see you again, man. Be
Yeah,
safe.
we don't know what the final form of this is going to be, so just understand I will be having you on again for another elongated conversation because there is so much that I would love to unpack with you. You have such a great valued knowledge and wide range of instruments. It's so crazy. So thank you so much, man.
Thanks so much, man. Have a wonderful night, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.
Peace. All right, I'm going to stop recording.